last ones to enter, and then we'll start. Give them a couple of seconds to find a seat. Yeah. I see more people than I expected. Okay, cool. All right, so thank you for coming to this talk. This is actually the first time that I give this talk in a conference. I've given this one before in local communities from where I'm from. Just before we get started, I'm just going to present myself. I'm Antonio Chávez. I'm the co-founder and lead engineer of a company called ConFoo Technologies. I'm going to explain a little bit later what we do. I'm the co-founder. I've been doing Ruby on Rails for the last 7 years, and if you want to find me on Twitter or on GitHub, that's my Twitter handle and my GitHub page. And I'm from Colima, I'm Mexican, so I'm from Colima, Mexico. In case you don't know, that's Colima, which is the 4th smallest state in Mexico. Nobody knows about Colima except people from Colima, right? There's this funny map about Colima where there's Mexico cities, Chilangos and stuff like that, and where Colima is, there's like a question mark. Nobody knows what's there. It's either it's interesting because I tell people I'm from Colima. Is that in the north? No, and if I go to the north, is that Belize? But then that's not it. We're right in the middle. So, but anyway, it has a great standard of living, and it has the smallest population, which is great because it's kind of like a very familiar city. And yeah, I worked from there. I got my first job there, which was a Silicon Valley company. A lot of companies are going down there because of the quality of living, which is great. And it's also, that also helps a lot of the people that are studying on universities, getting computer science engineering degrees and stuff like that. They can get the first job in a US company, which is fantastic. There's a lot going on there. There's communities, there's Web Dev Talks, Codificadas, which is Women Who Code, but the Colima version, Thinking Couch, Community MX, and Tech for Good. They are all about, hardware, software. The Web Dev Talks is the one that I have given more talks to. That's a community just dedicated for web development. No matter what programming language you use. There's no community for PHP, there's no community for Ruby. It's general. If you program in whatever you like, you can go there and give a talk and everybody's gonna be happy about it. And there's a crazy conference also happening this next month actually, which is in the beach. We have beautiful beach towns. There's conference during the day, 5 hours. After 5 p.m. everybody goes to party, right? That's all night, right? That's fantastic. I've been going to those conferences for the last 6 years, and every year is epic. So it's not a big conference though. It's about 100, 150 people that attend to that conference, but it's very good quality and very good. It's kind of like a vacation/conference in many ways. Anyway, just going back to the topic. Before we get started, I just want to ask you, how many of you have used MongoDB in the past? Oh, good. How many of you are using MongoDB right now on your jobs? A lot less than the ones that said, they used it in the past anyway. So, before we get started, just want to warn you, this is an opinion talk. I'm gonna talk about what were the experiences that we had at my company. This is not a talk of why you should leave MongoDB. It's about why we left MongoDB, and it's up to you to say, it's either you having these issues or not. Depends on your application. So just don't get angry at me yet. Although I had to admit that, before I got started, when I was thinking about this talk, because, back then, this was a year ago when we left MongoDB, I was angry, I was upset, incredibly upset. And, but after a lot of thought, and after I cooled down, basically, I realized that I was not angry at MongoDB. It was just that we were using it wrong. It was, our application was just the wrong case for the database. And we chose to move away from MongoDB for good, and I think it was for the best of the company. So yeah, I renamed the talk to why we left MongoDB, right? And I just want to talk to you about what Q does. We just do, we amplify marketing by coordinating media, optimizing conversion funnel, and activating advocates. That's kind of like a lot of buzzwords for marketing stuff, but in short, we just offer tools for websites to increase conversions. We offer sign-up forms, we offer conversion tools, we offer social proof widgets. We do all that through an SDK that you can just copy and paste into your website with a single line of code, and then you can activate users. And there's a contest side of it where people compete against each other to get the product or to get prizes and all that. We don't give the prizes. The ones that give the prizes away are the actual brand owners, right? But we encourage them to say, you want to have people actively using or being engaged with your campaign. Okay, just let them sign up, give them something to win, and they're just going to go crazy, right? And there's going to be a lot of conversions. We do Facebook share, Twitter, email. We have our referral unique link that you can copy and send it to a friend, and then you can invite them. It's basically a referral system in steroids, right? This is one of the campaigns that we did last year. This is Father.io. It's an augmented reality piece of work. Not piece of work. Sorry. It's a piece of hardware that lets you do shooter on first person. And they were able to fund, by 650% because of our campaign, right? They generated enough buzz before running the campaign using our tools, right? And that's basically it. No, that's kind of cool. We didn't develop that though. We're not that smart, right? We just did the tools. We gave them the tools for them to be able to, get a lot of conversions. And when the time came that they started the Indiegogo campaign, they got all the funding that they needed, right? 650%. This is kind of like an example of the community widget that we have. Is the top part is what we call the position bar, where you can see yourself, around a lot of fans. It's not necessarily that you see the fans there, you just see your progress, right? The second part that we have is the activity buttons, share, Twitter, share on Facebook, tweet, email, referral link. Inside of the referral link, we have a lot of different integrations where you can actually send a message, SMS, WhatsApp, or whatever. If you're on your phone, and we detect which device you're using, so we present you some different options for communication and sending messages. And the last part is like what we call the community side of the widget, right? So you see the people around you, and you see what they say, how many points they have. You can see all the activities, how many referrals they've gotten. And if you go to the Friends tab, you see your referrals and the people that you have on Facebook that has joined, right? So that's the community side of the widget. But anyway, so getting back to the topic, I joined the company in 2014. I was part of a consultancy company. They came as a project, and at the end of the year, I joined the company. And while I was there, the widget was completely different. And I joined full time to do what I just showed you, this one, right? That was not developed, and I just joined to pretty much build it. And this is kind of the code that you can embed. Just JavaScript, just one line, copy and paste that into your website, add the campaign token at the end of the URL, and then some smart tags that the SDK is going to be able to find and replace with the tools, right? And that all happens really, really quickly. So when I got started, it was already legacy code. It had 1 year of software development, and I didn't have a lot of choice in terms of architectural decisions because they were already made. And it was just Rail application, a monolithic application using MongoDB and using Redis. And I was like, okay, well, I think that's going to be good, right? And I didn't see any issues, so we moved forward. But basically, we didn't know about that, right? So we didn't have any major campaigns. We just had a couple of demos with 300 users and stuff like that, and it was just good. But this was basically you can have scalability problems if nobody uses your app, basically, right? And so this is a basic example of the structure of the collections in the database. It doesn't look very Mongo-like. If we take a moment to analyze it, we have a products collection. Inside a product, we have, product is kind of like our campaign. I'll probably explain more about that later. We have the rewards as an embedded collection, and then we have positions and users. But, given the guidelines of Mongo or how you should use, how you should define your collections, all that information should be inside products, right? So now we have rewards and we have positions, that's all Mongo-like, right? So that's great, but what would happen if we had hundreds of thousands of users using the campaign? What would that be like? And at this point, investigating, nobody really mentions that. I mean, at least not when I investigated back then in 2014. There was not a specific part of the documentation, right away where you can read that. And that's just the way that everybody tells you use MongoDB like that, and we just basically hit a wall, right? So that's 17 seconds of response time. And that was insane. So there was clients going crazy, and that was just pretty bad. And later on, we found that darkest corners of MongoDB documentation. I believe that now it is more explicit, but back then, that was the size limit of the document. And 16 megabytes for a database record is pretty big, right? And that was just a bad choice on design for the application, but we didn't know that. And that's around 100 users per campaign. So if you think about that, that's not viral. That's not even close to be viral. I mean, that's probably, you tell your coworkers in your office or something like that. That's not viral at all. So we went back to square one. So we have our, products collection with positions and users, right? So now we have associations with primary keys and all that, right? But then, now it's time to do reports, right? And I think, I think about it, and what Douglas Crockford said yesterday was actually kind of true. You don't have users, your application is going to be perfect all the time, right? And but there's no such thing, and customers want to see metrics, right? And we had to build them. And so we have this chart on the campaign management where you can actually see growth. This is from a campaign called Liberty Track. It's kind of like a bicycle, electric bicycle kind of thing. They got 200% lift, almost 200% lift from using our tools, like 200%. They got like organic users, 1,800, and then they got another 3,000 of users that got viral from the campaign. And it was the idea of this is that every time the user refreshed the browser, they would see an update on the metrics, right? So it should show right away what was the result. And this is the part that we use to generate with the aggregation framework. So yeah, as the users grew, the amount of time spent on calculating, on crunching that data grew as well. And as I mentioned, we use the aggregation framework, which has a lot of pipelines and stuff like that. You can define queries on stages and say, this is my where, and then this is the order, and then this is the result, and this is how I'm going to parse the results and all that. But then at the end, the aggregation framework is just MapReduce, easy to use, right? You don't have to write JavaScript functions for that. And as we discovered as well, MapReduce ignores the database indexes completely, right? Which obviously, you have database indexes there because you want your database to be performant, but if it just completely ignores them, you can't use it anymore, right? So we got that, around 30 seconds for 3,000 documents. That's not good in terms of user experience. That's just too bad. And we introduced Scikit. For anybody here familiar with Ruby on Rails development, there's a tool called Scikit that you can use for background processing. And we were okay, so let's send that out to the to a background processor. Let's run the metrics and all that. And And if we go back to the campaign from Father.io, it took 1 hour to run those metrics, which was, completely insane, right? Initially, we had a 5-minute space, and then we had to change it to 30 minutes, and then to an hour, and then at the end, it was 3 hours, every 3 hours, which, at least from our customer expectations was not good enough for seeing what was going on in the campaign. Then I questioned, where's MongoDB performance? This app has 2 parts. The one that is user-facing, that the first problem that we had with the design of the collections that we solved, with associations, with having each collection separate on its own document. And then, but when it came to do the reports, it was just insane. And then we came down to this. MongoDB is fantastic for doing simple operations. If you do inserts, it's insanely fast. If you do reads from specific database records or collections, it's insanely fast. But if you want to crunch big amounts of data, at least for us, it was not working. And we later also find out that MongoDB stores everything in memory, and then in the background stores in the database, which is also how Redis works. That's also why Redis is insanely fast as well, right? So that was our wall, basically. And we weren't able to generate metrics on a decent pace, and that's why those are mainly the reasons why we decided to leave MongoDB for good. And we pretty much, at this point, we were pretty much spending all the time putting out fires. So we fixed one thing here, and then something else was, crashing, and then we went there, fixed it, and then it was crashing, and then we're just back and forth on different parts of the applications. And all the advantages that MongoDB offers, which is you don't have to maintain a database schema, you can prototype fast, you can develop fast, all those kind of things that were just not working for us, in large scale. So that flexibility had a cost for us. So at this point, that was a year ago, and we decided to change to SQL. So we finally, after a lot of thought, after a lot of issues with customers, after a lot of money that we lost, we decided to go with SQL. It was kind of like an urgency thing. And we stopped all development, and we just spent a month doing it. Because that's what we know, and that's what we think is reliable, right? And there's a list of databases that we had to choose. There's PostgreSQL, MySQL, Oracle, MariaDB, which is kind of like a fork of MySQL. It has its advantages. But then we found out at the same time, while we were looking at alternatives for a database, we were also looking to migrate from Heroku to AWS, which is a lot faster. And we saw that database, which is Amazon Aurora, and it's compatible with SQL, with MySQL. So you don't have to change. The only thing that you have to do is change the gem, and nothing else. You just need you don't change the code. You don't have to change any feature specific of the database, because supposedly Aurora uses all MySQL features, right? So we're not using Aurora yet. We're still using MySQL, but Aurora is kind of like the long-term database change that we're going to do probably in the next couple of years, right? And so this is back to the stack. So this is our new stack, right? So now that we're using MySQL in small and specific operations, MySQL is kind of a little bit slower than MongoDB. So that's why we introduced Memcache. We have Redis for queuing, and then we have MySQL for the database, and obviously, it's still a monolithic app on Rails. But yeah, it was definitely good to be back on SQL. And right on, we had a drop on response time from 150 milliseconds to 50 milliseconds, which was, great. And also that was impacted, that performance was impacted because of the change that we did on Heroku, which, was kind of cool. Which, honestly, Rails is like light years, definitely, on response time. So, and the reports that I show you were from 1 hour to 40 seconds without doing any query performance improvement. What we did was just take the MongoDB query and translate it into SQL exactly where it was. And we just had that, you know. And we still don't have we still have the job processor, the background job processing service, because, you know, we don't want to have, you know, users waiting 40 seconds for, you know, 350,000 records for being crunch. You know, probably we had a thing that says we're crunching the data, hang on, and then after probably, you know, 5, 10, 15 seconds, depending on the size of the data, it's gonna automatically show up that. And it's really quick. I mean, it's much better. It has been improved, because this I'm still talking about, you know, probably 6 months ago, and this has been improved a lot lately. So given that, you know, I just realized how much potential we have hidden there. Queries can definitely be improved using SQL views, using, you know, all these different things that, you know, MongoDB does not have. So, and since a year ago, we haven't had any scalability issues. So since we basically left MongoDB, the scalability issues are basically gone. And talk you out on, you know, on my estimation on, you know, on how much time we lost in terms of business. We lost around a year of development, because we were, you know, putting out fires. We were holding back a lot on selling the product because we didn't have confidence on that the platform was going to scale if we run a lot of campaigns at the same time. Yeah, well, I think I went pretty quickly here. Anyway, so let's go to a conclusion. I think there's nothing wrong about using new technologies, but something simple as, let's try this tool. It can affect the business long term if you really, you know, don't make the right choice. And it's also not bad to use, you know, shiny tools. You know, this is an example of why people use Ruby. Everybody uses basically because it's shiny. But, you know, I had to learn the you know, the hard way that, you know, MongoDB was not the case. It was not the best database solution for our application. And, you know, obviously at this point, my opinion is that in terms of persistence, it's better to use, you know, a SQL database than use MongoDB. Obviously, in every project case, it's different, right? But generally speaking, it's better to use SQL. And yeah, if you're designing, my other conclusion is that if you're designing an application and you chose to use MongoDB, you start thinking about database associations, that's your first indication that you should stop with MongoDB. And you should move forward and just discard that and start with SQL. If you think, oh, this is a huge database architecture that I want to design using MongoDB, that's not good. I mean, MongoDB is meant to use differently. And like they say, you know, you don't know what you have until it's gone. You really, in this particular case, you don't really value the power of doing a join until you can't do it. It's very, very frustrating, and that's, you know, crazy in Spanish. That's a soap opera answer. And in my opinion, in that particular case, you know, for calculating metrics and all that, for me it's better to use SQL than MongoDB. And as I said, I went too quickly with that. Thank you. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Why did you not crunch your data before inserting?
Before inserting?
Yeah.
I'm just too, my mindset is just too deep into SQL that I can't think on other solutions other than that, right? Basically, when I was in school, everything they taught you was SQL, MySQL, PostgreSQL, whatever, right? And you know, I've been working with SQL for the last 7-8 years, and this was a project, you know, there was a company that I joined, and the decision was already made, and you know, I was kind of like also thinking in terms of SQL as well. Yeah. Questions? Any other questions?
Yeah. Can you give us some kind of numbers, like the average load on your servers, how many records in your database, just to get some kind of idea, you know, how much the improvement like was for you?
Well, in terms of load, at some point we had to increase, because we were using Compose back then for the database. We had to increase the memory on our database servers to 3 gigabytes, 4 gigabytes, 5 gigabytes, 6 gigabytes, because the data was just increasing, and it was getting just too big for us. And right now we have a deployment on AWS, on RDS, and that's using, I think, 1.5 gigabytes, and it never crashes. It hasn't crashed in a year, and we've had campaigns just as crazy as that one on 300,000 people, and it's just been working fine for us, at least at this point.
Another question, what is like your setup? Do you have like a bunch of shards or?
On MongoDB?
Yeah.
Or?
Well, that you had before.
No, well we have like the basic, master slave. But the thing with shards is that if we have the data distributed in many servers, when we want to crunch data, that's, I don't know, at least, because I don't have a lot of experience on that, but at least I think it's going to be more difficult to crunch, because you have to, you have to fetch a lot of documents from different databases, in this particular case. And I kind of wanted the data to be kind of centralized, so it's fast, but then, have all the capabilities of SQL, which I didn't have. Questions? More questions? Okay, good. Thank you. Oh, wait.
So I tried to look at other NoSQL databases.
Huh?
So you're talking about MongoDB, but have you tried other NoSQL databases, or they are all the same?
That's a good question. I mean, we were working with MongoDB, but we didn't look into other NoSQL databases. I think Hadoop or Cassandra has a lot more performance than MongoDB, but we haven't looked into that. I mean, we just wanted to go to something old, reliable, and that's it.
What had made you choose MongoDB initially? Like, what made you decide that we should use a NoSQL database for this?
I wasn't part of the company when that decision was made.
Okay.
That's the bottom line. So I came to the company, and it was kind of like, okay, so this is the architecture, or this is the stack. Let's work with it. And as I showed you in the picture, we didn't have any scalability issues because nobody was using the app, right? But then when the traffic grew, we start hitting all these walls. Yeah, thank you.
What was the conversation like when you were switching over?
With my partner?
Yeah.
It was an interesting one, because first I said, let's change to MongoDB, and he was like, oh, we don't have time for that. And I was like, but we should. I think this is gonna, blow up in our faces. And he was like, nah, let's wait. Kind of like holding back. And then when it blew, he was like, oh my God, why this is happening? And I'm like, okay, I told you, right? So and he was like, okay, so I think it's hard because customers are asking for features all the time, but let's invest. I think it's very, very valuable for the company to invest in this, because we at that point we basically we have basically spent almost 6 months or even more on managing just managing MongoDB, or managing all the issues that MongoDB was causing us, rather than developing actual features. And at that particular point, that was kind of like my sales pitch for him. Let's do this because I think this is going to push us forward in terms of business. And again, we lost a year basically in terms of business development. And it was pretty rough, but now things seem to be moving forward. But that was very highly impacting in our business. All right. Anybody more questions? Good. Thank you.